Today's story begins with Captain Lug, a man who has been talking to the skies since the days of World War II. But today is going to be one of the toughest days of his life, just as it would be for any father. Because if he doesn't make it back in time, who knows what he might have to go through. You see, today is his daughter's birthday. Before leaving home, he promised her that he would try his best to return as early as possible. With that promise, he set out for today's flight, a flight bound for Tokyo. But before takeoff, many things would happen, things you'll learn about today. First, Captain Lug undergoes his own health check to ensure he hasn't consumed any alcohol or fallen ill. Then, the same process is carried out for all the crew members. Afterward, they're briefed in detail about today's route. They're instructed on how to handle the flight under such conditions. The captain, his co-pilot, and the rest of the crew discuss keeping the passenger count slightly lower than usual to maintain balance in case of turbulence during the journey. After all the discussions, everyone has breakfast together. Meanwhile, many passengers have already arrived at the airport, completed their security checks, and begun boarding the plane. Before departure, the co-pilot conducts a final inspection inside and outside the aircraft to ensure nothing has been overlooked. During this time, the captain reminds the crew once again that today might be a difficult day, but no one should be afraid, and they must also keep the passengers calm. Our job, he says, is to get everyone to their destination safely. One by one, the passengers take their seats. Soon after, Tokyo Air Control and Beijing Air Control send clearance signals confirming that the flight is ready for takeoff. The takeoff goes smoothly, almost perfectly. As soon as the plane reaches a certain altitude, severe turbulence begins due to the bad weather. The passengers seated toward the back are immediately instructed, "Please fasten your seatbelts." This situation may continue for a while, though many passengers panic. The flight attendants calm them down, assuring, "Everything will be fine. There's nothing to worry about." At this moment, Captain Luke contacts Air Control and requests permission to climb higher, since continuing at this altitude amid such turbulence could be dangerous. After a few moments, permission is granted, and the aircraft ascends to a higher altitude. Once there, everything becomes perfectly calm. The bright sunlight reflects softly on the passengers' faces, and everyone breathes a sigh of relief. Junior Captain John switches the plane to autopilot mode to relax a bit. A flight attendant soon brings them coffee. While sipping it, John asks Luke, "Sir, what's the secret behind your perfection?" Luke smiles and replies, "You see, this route we're flying, I've flown it more than 100 times. Yet even today, I check every single detail carefully." Overconfidence is a person's greatest weakness. If you truly want to be the best, erase the word overconfidence from your mind. Fly every flight as if it's your first. During the conversation, he also mentions his daughter. It's her birthday today, and he's determined to get home as soon as possible. But just then, something strange happens. Suddenly, a crack appears on the airplane's windshield. Everyone is stunned. An incident like this might not occur even once in 100 flights. Luke immediately informs Air Control, "We need to descend." The control room is shocked. How is that even possible? But that was only the beginning. When Luke reaches out to inspect the crack, the entire windshield shatters into pieces. The aircraft is now flying at an altitude of about 9,300 meters, over 30,000 feet. At that height, the air pressure is so intense, it can tear a human body from the inside out. The co-pilot on the right side is nearly sucked halfway out through the window due to the pressure difference, but Luke manages to hold on to his seatbelt just in time, saving his life. Meanwhile, Air Control keeps sending repeated messages addressed to Flight 83, desperately asking for updates on the situation. But the condition inside the aircraft is so dire that no one is able to respond. From this moment on, the story takes an even darker and more terrifying turn. If at that very moment Luke, the captain, had loosened his grip even slightly, there was no guarantee that John, the co-pilot, would have survived the next second. The aircraft began to descend gradually. The passengers seated in the rear still didn't feel any unusual pressure since the cockpit door was closed. However, they could sense that the plane was going down. Suddenly, the direction of the outside air pressure shifted. Now, the wind was pushing inward. As a result, the cockpit door burst open. Now, everyone realized how terrifying the situation had become. Panic erupted across the cabin. Passengers began screaming, fear spreading like wildfire. Luke tightened his seatbelt even more and desperately tried to stabilize the plane. Doing so was incredibly difficult. The violent gusts of wind were shaking the entire cockpit. Yet, with extraordinary courage and skill, he somehow managed to steady the aircraft. Meanwhile, in the rear section sat the third captain, named Men. He tried to move forward to help, but the fierce wind made it nearly impossible to advance. The passengers, realizing his intent, pushed him forward, literally helping him fight against the storm to reach the cockpit. As soon as Men entered, he immediately locked the cockpit door to prevent further danger. Then he gestured to Luke, asking, "Are you okay?" Since speaking aloud was nearly impossible under the noise and pressure. Luke responded in sign language, "I'm fine, but the co-pilot is not." Together, the two of them began working to regain full control of the situation. Their first step was to inform air traffic control of everything: the state of the aircraft, how the windshield had shattered, and just how critical their condition was. Air traffic control instantly relayed the information to the Air Force. They had already suspected that something had gone wrong with Flight 830, so a fighter jet was immediately dispatched for assistance. Meanwhile, on the ground, Beijing Air Traffic Control cleared all air routes and announced, "Hold all flights until Flight 830 lands safely." But the biggest question remained: would they actually be able to land? Now, both pilots were fighting with everything they had to keep the plane steady. But the violent winds kept shifting direction again and again, throwing the aircraft off balance each time. And the story doesn't end here. In fact, the real crisis is only just about to begin. This was the real danger: pure panic and uncertainty everywhere. News spread quickly that Flight 830, bound for Tokyo, could crash at any moment. Every passenger and crew member on board was trembling with fear. Everyone thought maybe they'd never see their loved ones again. They frantically tried to make phone calls, but every signal was dead. No one could reach anyone. With each passing minute, the fear grew heavier and deeper. Air traffic control instructed the captain to reduce speed, but Luke refused. He knew that slowing down now would cause the plane to lose lift and drop suddenly, and that would be the end. Just then, ahead of them, appeared a massive thunderstorm. A storm so violent it was nearly impossible to avoid. Tension gripped the entire control room. Everyone was searching for a solution, but there seemed to be none. The lives of 180 passengers now hung by a single thread. One wrong move, and it would all be over. Every eye was now fixed on Luke, and he made his decision. To survive, we have to fly through the storm. He pushed the throttle forward and plunged straight into the heart of the tempest. Within seconds, the aircraft began to shake violently. Passengers screamed in terror, the fear of death pressing down on every heart. The flight attendants tried desperately to calm them. "Please pray. Only God can help us now." Down below, inside the Beijing air traffic control room, every gaze was locked onto the radar screen. Mr. Zhen, one of the controllers, had tears streaming down his face because his wife was on that very flight. And then, Beijing air traffic control suddenly received a signal. A faint light blinked on the radar screen. Flight 830 was back on their radar. The monitor showed that Captain Luke, with sheer courage and determination, had managed to steer the plane safely out of the deadly storm. As the plane somehow emerged from the storm, its altitude had dropped significantly. And suddenly, right ahead, a mountain. In an instant, Luke pulled the aircraft upward, miraculously grazing the mountain's peak before leveling off into the sky. The jolt caused a few seats in the rear to shift downward, but astonishingly, no one was injured. Meanwhile, on the ground, emergency preparations were underway. Everyone knew that at any moment, Flight 830 would attempt to land. The question on everyone's mind: would they make it safely? Thousands of people and journalists had gathered around the airport, all eager to capture this historic moment. The instant the aircraft's wheels would touch the runway, fire trucks and medical teams were stationed along both sides of the runway, ready for any emergency. Now, all responsibility rested on one person, Captain Luke. With a calm voice, he announced, "Landing procedure is commencing." Slowly, the plane descended over the city toward the runway. Everyone held their breath. Finally, with a violent jolt, the aircraft touched down, but its speed was too great. The plane refused to stop. To make matters worse, the back wheel had locked. People outside could see the plane still sliding forward. Immediately, air control ordered, "All fire trucks, move forward." Inside, co-pilot John had regained consciousness. He slammed the brakes with all his strength. The tires burst, smoke rose, but the plane still wouldn't stop. In the end, the three of them, Luke, John, and men pulled the back thrust together. The aircraft finally roared to a stop at the very end of the runway. A moment of silence was followed by screams of relief. "We're safe!" After 2 hours of this nightmare, life seemed to return to everyone aboard. They knew they had returned from the edge of death. Captain Luke, over the microphone, calmly announced, "All passengers are safe. I apologize for any inconvenience. I take responsibility for this error because I did not properly inspect the windshield before takeoff." But the passengers, speaking together, said, "You are an angel to us. God sent you to save our lives." As everyone began to disembark, Captain Luke remained alone in the cockpit for a moment because he knew a pilot always boards first and lands last, for on his shoulders rests the responsibility for the lives of 200 souls. Without thinking of his own safety, he fought until his very last breath, ensuring that every single person, every passenger, survived. One by one, everyone disembarked from the aircraft. When the engineering team entered the cockpit, they froze at the sight. Shattered glass, torn wires. How could anyone possibly have landed the plane safely in such a state? One engineer rushed forward, grabbed Captain Luke's hand, and said, "You are God. Thank you." Outside, hundreds of relatives and loved ones were waiting. When the news arrived that everyone was safe, their joy knew no bounds. At that moment, Captain Luke called his wife. With a smile, he said, "I'm coming home to celebrate our daughter's birthday. I had promised her, and I intend to keep it." Outside the airport, Captain Luke was welcomed like a hero. People saluted him. Some cried. Others clasped his hands. As a pilot, he had not just flown a flight. He had saved the lives of 180 people. At home, Luke embraced his family. His daughter ran to him and exclaimed, "Happy birthday to me, Papa. You kept your promise." That night, the entire family celebrated together, a birthday filled with laughter, joy,